We're ready to begin Unit 3 of our SAS class. Let's find the notes for this. We're here on the notes page of our website, and we're going to click here on Modifying Data. So we click here, and we see that unlike in previous units, this unit has very few commands that we're going to learn about, but you will find that you can do an awful lot with these few commands. So, what are we really going to cover with these very few commands? The title of the unit is Modifying Data, but more correctly, it probably should be Modifying and Documenting Data. Now, data documentation is the kind of thing that people who are just starting out in research often like to blow past and skip over and get to the excitement of the data analysis instead of taking all the time to do the boring stuff of documenting your data. However, this is a mistake that most people make exactly one time, because although once you get into the analysis and you work on it day and night for weeks on end, and you're certain that you will never be able to forget any aspect of this data analysis, even if you want to, the truth is that at some point the analysis comes to an end. You either move on to a new project, if you're lucky you get to go on vacation, something else comes up, and when you come back to this data analysis to write it up, to address the comments of reviewers for your article or for whatever reason, you find that your memory may begin to fail you. And it's at this point that you will very much wish that you had taken the time to document your data so that you know what's going on when you come back to it, or if you hand the data set over to a friend or another colleague for analysis, those people will very much appreciate the effort you take in documenting your data. So, let's get into this. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here so we can see some more of the notes. And as before, I have taken these commands off of the web page and put them into my SAS editor window so that it's all there and we can look at this and go over what's going on, and you don't have to sit there and watch me try and type and make all sorts of silly typos and that kind of stuff. I'm going to come down here and click on SAS, and as you can see, here's the program. And up here we have the log window just as we had in the last unit. Again, I have closed off the Explorer window and the results windows that used to be over here on this side. You don't need to do that. I've done it only to maximize the amount of screen space that I have for these two windows and the output window when I need it, just to make the presentation a little easier for everybody to see. Okay, we're going to start out by having a look to see what the data set looks like, and to do that we'll use proc contents. This is the command that we learned about in the last unit. We have the data option here and a path name. This is where I have saved this data set. If you've saved the data set in a different location on your computer, which you probably have, just make the necessary modifications to this path. Okay, I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to come up here and click on my running person. And there we go. I'm going to click here to page up to the top of my output, and we see here that we have the data set that we requested. I'm using SAS version 8. This is when the data set was last modified. We have 200 observations, 11 variables, no indexes, and the data set is sorted. Now scroll down a little bit to have a look at the variables that we have here. So here's the variable gender, ID, math, program type, race, etc., etc. You can see that because we did not use the position option as we had in the previous unit, the variables are not listed in the position that they occur in the data set, but rather in alphabetical order. And this number out here tells you the position they occur in the data set. So gender is the first variable, ID is the second variable, math is the ninth variable in the data set, and so on. So we have all this information, which you've already seen before. And we see down here that the data are sorted by program type. Okay, so that's what we have here. We have a few labels for some of the variables, but not for all of them. And we would like to make some more labels and do some other kinds of stuff. Okay, I'm going to come down here and click on my editor window to bring that back up. And let's start using proc format. Okay, proc format is a little bit different from the other procs that we've used so far in that you do not have a data option for this proc. Instead, what you do is create value labels for your variables, and then you can apply them to any variable that you want. And you can use these formats that you create with any data set that you happen to have open in SAS. Okay? Remember that SAS allows you to have multiple data sets open at one time, and so you can use a value that you create in any of the data sets that you have open. And this can be very handy at times. So let's go through this and see what we've got. We have a value statement. On this statement, we give the format itself a name. So here we called it SCL. And here we have, for a value of 1, we'd like the label of public. And here, for a value of 2, we'd like the label of private. And if we come down here to our proc freq, we're going to do a frequency of school type. And now we see that we have a format statement here, and we are going to assign to the variable school type this value. Now you'll notice that this value here, value label here, ends in a period. And all of the value label kinds of things end in a period. Whether you create the label yourself, as we have done right up here in this proc format, or if it is a SAS supplied format. For example, there are all sorts of numeric formats, all sorts of date formats, stuff like that. All of those end in a period in that SAS's way of knowing what is a variable name versus what is a format name. And so you will find that you can use a format statement in quite a few procs. And the other thing to note is that if you don't use the format statement in a particular proc, the format isn't used. In other words, the formats are not permanently assigned to the variables for which you have created them. Now there is a way to do that permanent assignment, and that's a whole nother matter. So let's just stick with what we've got here. I'm going to highlight both of these, and now I'm going to come up here and click on my running person. And before we get to all of this output, let's come over here and look at our log. Make sure that nothing bad happened over here. I'm going to scroll up some. We see that the proc format ran correctly. Our format has been output. That's exactly what we want to see. I'm going to scroll down some here, and now we see that our proc freq was run. So let's come back down here and we'll click on output so that we can see what we've got. I'm going to page up here a little bit. Nope, that's the proc contents output, so it looks like we only have one page of output here. And here is the label, here is the frequency, and the percents, and so on. And so previously we saw this output before, but we had a 1 and a 2 here, and now we have the labels of public and private. Okay, so that's how you create value labels. Let's come back down here to the editor window. I'm going to move on to another kind of labeling that can be very handy, and this is labeling both a data set and labeling a variable. So what we're going to do here in this data step, this part right here is the data step, Okay, we're going to call it HS1. We have no quotes and no dots, no anything else here. So this is going to be a temporary data set. It's going to reside in the work library. Okay, we are going to base it on this data set here, which is a permanent data set. Okay, we are going to label our temporary data set with the label high school and beyond 200 cases. And now we are going to use a label statement to label the variable school type. And this is the label that we're going to give to school type, and then we'll end with a run statement. Okay, so we've labeled two things in this data step. We have labeled the data set, HS1, with this label, and we've labeled this variable with this label. Okay? We're going to highlight that, come back to our running person and click on him or her, and then we will see that really nothing seems to have happened. And that's not surprising because most data steps don't produce any sort of output, so SAS doesn't have anything to show you. However, if we come down here to the log and have a look, we will see that SAS recognized the commands and there appeared to be no errors. So, let's come back down here to our program, and I'm going to run this proc contents, and you see here that the data equals, this is our temporary data set that we created right up here. Again, we'll click on our running person, and here is the proc contents. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Oops, a little too far there. Okay, here we go. And we see that we have the data set work.hs1. Here's our 200 observations, our 11 variables. Everything is the same, but now look here. The data set is labeled with this label that we gave it. And if we scroll down here a little bit, we will see here's our variable school type, and here's the label that we gave it. Okay, so this is how you can label. Now you know how to label three things. You know how to label the data set itself, you know how to assign a variable label, and you know how to assign value labels. Now, let's move on to a slightly more complicated program, and we're going to do all sorts of things in this program, and the program is going to consist of one proc and one data step. I'm going to come down here and click on my editor so that we can see what's going on here. And we have a proc format. This is the proc that we're going to use. And for the time being, I'm going to increase the size of this window here so that you can see more of the program. So we have proc format. Now this stuff here in this bright green, these are comments. And comments are created, and there's a couple of ways of doing it, but the way we've selected to do it is to start it with an asterisk. This is what you get when you press your shift key and then the number 8, and it always ends in a semicolon. If you forget this semicolon, everything is a comment until SAS encounters the next semicolon. For example, if I just hit my backspace key here, you notice that everything up to private just became that light green, and this part here will not be executed because it's all part of a comment. So I'm going to press my semicolon on my keyboard to bring that back to the way it was. Okay, so those are comments, and we have comments in here throughout the program to help you understand what we're doing. Now, I strongly advise people to comment their programs because it helps you to remember not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. This is especially true if you are recoding variables and you want to remind yourself of the logic of recoding it this way as opposed to that way. You want to indicate to yourself some subtle changes between doing a procedure one way and doing it another way. Well, comments are really good for that, and it's very nice that you can just kind of intersperse them there wherever you need them. So, in this proc format, we're going to recreate this value label that we've already created. We're going to create two more. We're going to create one called ABCDF, and it looks like we're assigning grades here. And then we are going to create labels for the variable female. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to come down here and highlight all of this stuff, and I'm going to come up here and click on my running person. And again, you'll see that not much happened, and that's because proc format produces no output, so SAS has nothing to show you, and so it just doesn't change windows on you. But if we come back down here to the bottom and click on our log, we see that everything went as we intended. And we have a little note here saying that this value label was already in the library, and that's what we expected because we'd already created it. Okay, so all of that went as planned. Let's come back down here. I'm going to click on my editor window again, and I'm going to scroll down, and this is the data step. Okay, so we're creating a data file called HS1, and we're going to label it. Well, we've already done this, but we can do it again. Okay, now SAS will overwrite the previous version of HS1 that we've already created, and it isn't going to say anything about it. Other statistical packages will say, do you really want to do this? Or it'll say, no, I'm not going to do it unless you use a special option, something like that. SAS is perfectly willing to let you overwrite the data set that you've already created. This can be very handy if you're trying to debug a program and you don't have to keep answering dialogues about overwriting things. On the other hand, you can inadvertently overwrite something that you didn't mean to, and, well, that can be unfortunate at times. So you need to be careful about how you label data sets here. We have the set statement, and this reads the file from, whoops, it doesn't read it from there. It reads it from here, and it looks like I just forgot to change this when I was changing all of my directories. But this, it just says that it's going to take it from wherever it is on the hard drive. We're going to use a label statement. Well, we've already done this, but we can do it again. That's all right. And now we're going to use some if-then statements to create a new variable, which we're going to call prog, short for program, type again, which is a numeric variable. And why would we do this? Well, PRG type here is a string variable, and we saw that in the various proc contents that we've done up till now. And using a string variable in most analysis procedures isn't going to work. There are a couple of procedures that will allow the use of a string variable, but there aren't very many of them, and it's often a good idea to create a numeric version of the string variable. Now, I want to stress that it's important not to overwrite the original variable when you're doing something like this, in case something goes wrong, or in case at a later time you change your mind about how you want this variable to be converted into the numerics. Okay, so if you blow out your original string variable, you have nothing to go back to. So in this set, what we've done is said if this variable equals this value, and because it's a string variable, this value must appear in quotes. Use the keyword then. Here's the name of our new variable, and we set it equal to a value. And then we go through here and change all of the values. Now, we happen to know that absolutely every observation in this data set has a value of either academic, general, or vocational. Okay, if you are not absolutely positive on this, you can use an else statement to capture anything peculiar, missing data, anything like that. Okay, if I were to have missing data values here, they would come over as missing in this new value simply because I haven't assigned anything to missing values from this variable right here. Okay, so this is the creation of the numeric variable. Right here, we're going to label that new numeric variable. And now we're going to move on down, and we're going to deal with the variable gender. Okay, we're going to create a new variable which we're going to call female. It's going to be identical to the variable gender, and then we're going to use a drop statement. So we're saying that female equals gender, and then we're going to drop the variable gender. And this is just an easy way of renaming a variable. There are other ways of doing this in SAS that require only one line instead of 2 lines, but you can do it this way, and this is very easy to understand. So we're going to use another label statement. We're going to label our new variable female. We're going to come down here and deal with our race variable, and it turns out that if your race equals 5, well, then somebody made an error in inputting the data. There were only 4 categories of race, and since we don't know what was really intended when somebody typed in the number 5, we're just going to change all of those to missing. And so that's what we're doing here. And for a numeric variable in SAS, a missing value is usually represented as a dot. It's the period on your keyboard. Okay, now we're going to go on and create a new variable. We're going to call our new variable total, and we will set it equal to the sum of read, write, and social studies. We're also going to create a new variable. We're going to call it grade, and it's going to be equal to the variable total. Okay, now what you need to understand in each of these last 3 cases where we've created variables is that it is new variable equals old variable. Okay, some people like to get confused with this equal sign because in other situations it doesn't make any difference on which side you put one thing or the other because they're equal. In SAS, it matters a great deal because SAS assumes that the first variable it encounters is the new variable. Okay, if you switch these 2 names, the program isn't going to work. Alrighty, so that's that. Let's move on down some now. Told you this was a long program. Oh, there we are. Get towards the end here. So we're using if-then statements to recode the variable grade. So we're going to say if the variable total is less than 80, then the variable grade equals 0. If the variable total is less than or equal to 80 or greater than 110, less than 110, then grade equals 1, and so forth and so forth and so forth, so that we have 5 values of the variable grade. Okay, and then finally we're going to use another label statement to label our new variable grade. Alright, that was quite the long one. I'm going to use the shift key on my keyboard and the up arrow so that I can start highlighting all of this stuff, and I'm going to keep highlighting all the way up until I get to the top of my data step. There we go. Alrighty, so that's the whole data step. And now I'm going to come up here and click on my running person. And doesn't look like a whole lot happened. Let's get over to the log window and make sure that we don't have any errors. Okay. Okay, we're up to 14 variables. That's good because we created a few. I'm going to scroll up here and look through this to make sure that I don't see any warnings or any errors. We're still scrolling and still scrolling because this was a long one. And it looks like we made it through all right. Okay. So I'm going to come back down here to my editor. I'm going to click here to bring it back into the editor. Scroll down some. There's the whole data step that we ran. And now let's have a look to see the results of our work. And to do that, we'll use these last 3 procedures. I'll start off here with this proc contents. Highlight that and click on my running person. And here's the proc contents. I'm going to scroll up a little bit so that we can see the top of our output. Here we go. Okay, so we have 14 variables. All this stuff looks about right. Okay. Scrolling down now a little bit. And here are the variable labels that we created. Here are the new variables that we created. You can see that SAS added them in to the very end of the data set. Okay, so That's that. We see that the variable gender is gone. That's good. We dropped that. And so everything looks just about right. Now you see that we don't see a whole lot about our value labels that we created with that proc format. And again, that's because we don't have them permanently assigned to any of the variables. So when you do a proc content, SAS isn't looking at that. But there is a way to see if everything went as planned for that one as well. Let's come back here to our editor. And we will use a proc print. So we're going to print out only the first 20 observations. That's what this option up here will allow us. And you will see that we have a format statement here. So we have the format. Here is a variable name. Here is the format name, variable name, format name, variable name, format name. We will use proc print to see how all of this came out. Highlight that, come up here to our running person, and we click here, and now we can see that all of our labels have been applied as we expected. So here are the labels for school type, for program type, and for the variable female. And we see that we have our grade set up too. Okay, that's good. Let's come down here to our editor, and looks like the last thing we're going to do is run a proc freak. Okay, so again, we have the format statement here, the variable name, format name, variable name, format name, and we're going to do one-way frequency tables for both of these variables. Do my highlight, running person, and here is the output. So we can see here that we have the variable labels for both of the variables. Okay, so this is how you can modify your data set, how you can modify the output to make it perhaps more interpretable. It's obviously a little easier to know who are the males and who are the females when you have those labels used in your output, as opposed to the zeros and ones, which are still the numerics of that variable. It's still a numeric variable. Those values are still there, and that's what SAS is actually operating on. This is just a display issue. Okay, so these value labels that we've created haven't changed the variable in any way. It's just made the output a little bit easier to understand. Alrighty, I think that is the end of Unit 3.